Some of the greatest creativity and innovation in modern cinema can be found within the films of American director Stanley Kubrick. Two films in particular stand out in Kubrick's filmography for their editing styles and techniques: the horror film The Shining and the erotic thriller film Eyes Wide Shut, the latter of which would be Kubrick's final film before his death and, in my opinion, is his masterpiece. Kubrick was one of the surprisingly few directors of the 20th century who could be labelled an auteur, meaning he would always have a dominating influence over his films and his vision would always be on the screen. Film critic Roger Ebert wrote of Eyes Wide Shut, "All of these scenes have their own focus and intensity. Each sequence has its own dramatic arc. They all lead up to and away from the extraordinary orgy sequence in A Country Estate, where Dr. Bill Gate crashes and wanders among scenes of obscure sexual ritual. The masked figure who rules over the proceedings has ominous presence, as does the masked woman who warns Dr. Bill he is in danger. This sequence has hypnotic intensity." And as you will see, this is clearly achieved through the editing and cinematography of that scene, where Kubrick can convey this hypnotic intensity that is within his film. The thing about these two films with regards to Murch's philosophy is that pretty much that emotion should dominate the frame, with an emphasis on the progression of story, rhythm, eye trace, and the consistency of actors' movements and eye lines across the cuts. As these are two Hollywood-produced professional feature films, one should expect that these two films should adhere to Murch's editing philosophy, and they do, but in such a way that powerfully evokes interest from the viewer and conveys the progression of the story as well as the characterization of the people within it. So here in this scene, we've got little Danny riding on his tricycle, coming through the corridor of the big Overlook Hotel where he and his parents are the caretakers over the winter period, and we follow along from a big wide shot coming up, kind of separated from Danny, but now we're in his perspective, and then bang, dead on, he sees the two girls still within the wide shot there at the end of the corridor. And obviously it's timed well with the music, the big bang on hitting there, and we see little Danny here just staring at them in complete awe, staying on that shot for quite some time actually, not much cutting here. And so in order to really get his emotion from his eyes here and the shock of looking at the girls, and then we again cut back to the same shot between the close-up of Danny and the medium shot of the girls to really get what's going on here, and there is consistency here between the shots, so he's just in complete terror of seeing these two girls in this hotel. It's supposed to be empty, so it's clearly a vision within the film, and it's also significant to the story here because as he uses his psychic abilities for kind of getting to know them, and so cutting here to the girls, normal shot of the girls talking, and then cutting to this kind of quick cut, or we could call smash cut of the girls' bloody corpses all over the corridor. Very gruesome, which is very horrific to the audience. So we cut back to Danny and back to the girls, and then again to the bodies for the third time now, and to the girls again. So clearly kind of horror film stuff going on here, but also it's so effective through the editing because you're cutting between Danny's horrified face, kind of what the audience should be feeling, particularly that he's a little boy, so this is pretty horrifying stuff for a little child to see, and so we can kind of relate to him there by looking through his eye trace and his face and his emotion, and then now he looks here and the girls are gone, all by using the same shots. Only 3 shots actually used here in this entire little sequence of a mashup of cutting between this horrific sequence of the two girls. So in terms of Murch's philosophy, there is definitely emotion being used here in Kubrick's film, and to the effect that it is a horror film and is definitely pretty chilling and pretty suspenseful there, with the relatively few cuts and kind of long takes here in the shot. So I think that sequence is very effective in using Murch's philosophy for that scene. And now we'll go into Eyes Wide Shut, and I'll play that clip now. Again, how these two films reflect Murch's philosophy is that they are two very significant parts of the story. In fact, in both films, in each respective film, it's a very big turning point for the plot. Especially here, this is kind of the big moment of the second act where Dr. Bill Harford, played by Tom Cruise, is this big wealthy doctor in New York City, and he's managed to get himself quite bravely and boldly into this big, crazy masked orgy ritual in this big mansion kind of in the country of New York, and now he's just been caught out, and as we cut here, bang, with this really chilling piano score here, as everyone in the room is staring at him. And so there's some really great, actually, to just briefly talk about cinematography, there's some really great symmetry here with what's going in the frame here. So it's kind of visualized and framed as a kind of painting, obviously with the wall design and all the masks and the colors in the center there. So this kind of circular formation they've made there. And especially the editing here too. What is amazing about this sequence is that they're all wearing masks, all these people, and the masks are all different. They're all unique, and yet we're cutting between them, and we can kind of feel this similar emotion, even though each mask kind of conveys a different kind of emotion. It kind of groups all these people together into one thing. So they are faceless in a way, just through the cutting, by only showing their eyes, which is a big part of Murch's philosophy, the whole how eyes can convey emotion. And so we're seeing so little of that, and yet I feel like there's a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling and a lot of power going on with these characters, who are obviously on a serious power trip, considering they're these at this absurd big ritualistic event of just sex and all sorts of crazy stuff, all dressed up in costumes, and these are grown men and women doing this in some mansion. So there's obviously a lot going on behind that, but and actually so much on the surface. And then back to this shot, the original shot, and he's now being gestured towards who they call the red cloak, right in the middle there. And so slowly we're just following with him, and here we cut to a shot now of a moving dolly shot moving forward. So now we're in Bill's perspective, and we're kind of getting closer to this mystery, this suspense here, like what's going to happen, who is this person, what's going to happen to Bill. And as we pull back with him, he's now being surrounded by these masked elite occultist people, and so all done, I suppose, quite similar to The Shining as discussed before. Not many takes going on, which I suppose you may say is so deliberate, because Kubrick, and I suppose his editor too, is very comfortable with how his story is progressing and unfolding in his own vision, and is not really kind of going that he has to cut to so many different things because he's uncomfortable or unsure or isn't confident of his ability to edit his film successfully and effectively. So in this sequence here, this idea kind of touching on the Soviet montage theory kind of promulgated by Sergei Eisenstein, big Soviet director back in the early 1920s, cutting here between each kind of emotion and each facial kind of expression in the scene. It's not quite technically the montage, but there is a lot of cutting between different stuff here, and we can have at least kind of a two-shot. We can have at least two people in each of these shots when we're cutting between the masked people. So there is definitely a lot there going on with regards to that theory. But obviously Murch's theory overall is the dominating force here in this film, and as a professional feature films, you would expect that's obviously happening, and there is obviously a lot of detail going on here in a relatively really short little sequence. So, and if I can just speak personally, that is definitely reflective of the amount of creativity and originality in these two films that I think really brilliantly well done. Not just the editing, but the production design here, the cinematography, everything, the pacing, it's all flows very well together. And so, yeah, that is how the editing of The Shining and Eyes Wide Shut, both directed by Stanley Kubrick. And here is my list of references, which I'll leave up at the end for consideration. Yeah, thank you.